Hi, everyone. Welcome back. So, last time we talked a lot about the refutation of spontaneous generation theory and the development of what we now call germ theory of disease. We also talked a lot about some important figures in medical and microbiological history, particularly with respect to microbes and disease. So, at this time, people were really thinking that microorganisms were the main causes of disease, essentially major villains that we had to face, defeat, destroy. Essentially, people began to think that this was all that microorganisms did. But that isn't necessarily the case. So we did have some researchers that came around this time as well, very influential. These are two Russian scientists, Sergei Winogradsky and Martinus Bezernik. These researchers were really influential in revealing the positive side of microbial life, recognizing that not all microbial organisms cause disease. In fact, that's only a small subset of microbial life. Most of microbial organisms are what we call free living. These are organisms that don't cause disease. They just hang out in the environment. They might be photosynthesizers that make lots of sugar from sunlight. They might be nitrogen fixers that take forms of nitrogen and turn them into other things. They're doing various different processes in the environment, not in the way that causes disease. So these are actually really important organisms we've come to understand. And they do something really, really cool called nutrient cycling. Essentially, this is when organisms, just through their own lifestyle, through the things that they eat and the things that they poop out, the ways that they do metabolism, things like that, that they move nutrients from one organism to the next or from one form to another. So, for example, when a plant does photosynthesis, it takes carbon dioxide and it takes the carbon out of that carbon dioxide. It takes that carbon and it combines it with several others to create glucose, sugar. Okay, so we've actually taken the carbon that was trapped up in something that we, for example, can't use. You breathe in carbon dioxide, it is useless to you. And then plants take that and turn it into something that is useful, tasty, tasty sugar, right? So this is an example of nutrient cycling. It's the transition of nutrients in one form moving into another form, and also moving into another organism. When you go to eat that sugar, say you made a salad for yourself and you ate some spinach, well, the sugar and other resources that were in that spinach are now moved into you. Bacteria, especially, but lots of other microbes, are very important for exactly this. There are lots of organisms that rely on microbial life to make nutrients available to them. So over time, we've come to understand that microbes are kind of everywhere. They live in virtually every environment all the time. They play really important roles in these nutrient cycling efforts and do a lot of other really important things that we don't often think about. And here's just a couple of these really important roles I'm going to list here. Microbes are responsible for decomposing organic matter, basically making it so that when an organism dies, the body doesn't just sit around forever. They're really important food sources for a lot of other organisms. Lots of things eat them. They make resources very accessible in the way that we talked about before. They also can take things that are pollutants and break them down. And then in some cases, like things that are toxic to us, they can either break them down in some cases or capture them and store them, maybe even utilize them. So that makes our environments safer for us if we take like toxic metals and allocate them and things like that, put them kind of out of the way of people coming into contact with them. And there's a lot more. There's a lot more that various microorganisms can do. And we'll explore some of those things over the course of the class. That's a very important quality that microorganisms have. What we're really talking about here, we're discussing ecology. Microorganisms have their own ecology. That is, they have their own interactions with other organisms, other forms of life, in very complex ways a lot of the time. That includes microscopic life, like other kinds of bacteria, maybe like tardigrades and rotifers, or like algae and things like that. But also macroscopic organisms, larger things that are not so small that we can't see them with the naked eye. Their lives impact the lives of other species. They impact us, yes, through disease and things like that, but also through their fermentation, their nutrient cycling, them being food for things that we might eat, for example, and so on. And they're very influential. They shape the environment in ways that are not so subtle. In later chapters of this class, later units, we're going to explore this in a lot more detail. But the planet itself has been transformed, and I'm not exaggerating here. Has been very much transformed by microbial life and the lifestyles that they lead. And so even today, very influential, very important. Even in our body, we house a very robust and diverse community of microorganisms. I'm talking billions and billions and trillions, really, of non-human cells that live on our body or inside of us. And many of these organisms are with us and cooperating mutualistically, meaning that they're partners with us. They do something good for us and we do something good for them. We provide them with a place to live and access to food, a lot of the time food that we eat, and then they help us in different ways. Sometimes that means helping us digest that food. They break down things that we normally can't digest and make them available to us, or actively protecting us from sources of disease. So they're very important for us. This community, we call this the microbiome, or you could also call it the normal microbiota. This is a dynamic community of microorganisms of all kinds. That includes bacteria, that includes fungi, that includes archaea, which we will talk about later. This whole other very poorly understood group of microbial life that live in and on our bodies. Now, we can break this microbiome up into resident microbiota and transient microbiota. The resident microbiota, these are species that are constantly with us. They're always on our skin, always in our body, always doing different things for us, and they're just perpetually here. A transient microbiota, these are species that come and go. They're transient. They're not typically stable on the body. They haven't really colonized our body as much as they are just kind of here one moment, gone the next. But that doesn't mean that can't change. It is the case that transient microbiota can become resident microbiota. And we can actually modify who is resident in our body, which is really a significant thing, particularly in medicine. And again, later in the semester, this will be a topic of conversation. Now, there is certainly a line between friend and foe, however. So humans, we are thoroughly colonized by microorganisms. Again, mostly bacteria, but also some other groups. And a lot of these microbes are either innocuous to us, like they don't cause us harm, but they don't really help us either. or even friendly, where they do actively benefit our lives. But under different circumstances, sometimes these species can actually cause disease. This is where we see a difference between normal pathogens, like typical pathogens, things that are evolved to cause disease. Think like tuberculosis. Tuberculosis is not a friendly bacterium. Mycobacterium tuberculosis, which causes tuberculosis, this is an exclusive pathogen. It lives to kill people. That's its main job. In order to replicate and spread, it must infect a person, cause symptoms, make them sick, and eventually, the person dies of the sickness. And so that is what we would think of as a normal pathogen, something that will cause disease in a healthy individual. It's evolved to do that. Opportunistic pathogens, their normal MO is not disease causing. They don't usually cause disease for us, but they can cause disease under the right circumstances, under the right conditions. Say, for example, you step on a nail. You're walking around outside and you step on a nail, and now that dirty nail has pushed bacteria through your skin, past it, and into the fascia of the underside of your foot. Okay? Well, that's pretty bad, because normally you have friendly bacteria that sits on the surface of your skin, like, for example, various Staphylococcus species. And they're just fine on the surface of your skin. But if they get too deep, they can potentially cause severe infection. They could cause like a staph infection. Similarly, we often think about stepping on a rusty nail, things like that, with tetanus. That's a species that we call Clostridium tetani. That species also, you encounter it all the time in soil, and you are never made sick by it until you have accidentally pushed it past your protective skin into a place where it does not normally go. Only then does it actually cause disease. These are all opportunistic pathogens. They don't really cause disease on a normal basis. But if things change, if your immune system wanes, if you bypass one of your major barriers for defense, like your skin, for example, then you can open the door for a more severe infection, where these normally non-pathogenic species can become pathogens. Now, our bodies have diverse methods for keeping these opportunistic pathogens at bay. Most of our body is actually kept completely sterile, where we don't have non-human cells occupying them. For example, your bloodstream, that'd be very bad if you had microbial life living inside of your bloodstream. Your muscle tissue, your various organs that don't have cavities that open into the outside world. Like, for example, your stomach. Right? Your stomach, your esophagus, things like that. Those have direct line opening to the outside world because you're putting food in to go into that direction. But organs like your brain, your heart, your liver, your spleen, things like that. Well, those are organs that are not open to the outside world. They are sterile unless something has gone very wrong. Those are maintained sterile because we have a very effective immune system that will actively attack pathogens of all kinds, including opportunistic microbes. Essentially, this is their deterrent, one of many deterrents, that if they start causing disease, we have a healthy immune system that can step in and stop that. So that is what happens under ideal conditions. And then also, our body is protected by other friendly microbes. Microbes have a weird way of being able to police each other. They can kind of help keep each other in line. preventing some that would normally want to cause disease from causing that disease. And so, in many cases, keeping a healthy microbiome, a diverse microbiome with your friendly species with you, can actually help keep you healthy, where your immune system has to do less work to keep everything in line. Now, diseases that are caused by these pathogenic microbes are what we would call infectious, meaning they're capable of being passed on to other organisms. They develop the disease after they encounter that pathogen you are harboring. So if you're infected and then you, I don't know, wipe your infected wound on somebody's sleeve or whatever, and then they get exposed to it, they can become infected as well. This is the case even for opportunistic pathogens. They too can be infectious, although, again, they tend to require specific conditions in order to be effectively infectious. Let's talk a little bit about disease as a whole here. So a disease that is emerging, an emerging disease, is one that is novel and it is increasing in incidence. It's becoming more common. So, for example, here's a species, this is a specific strain of a very familiar Escherichia coli, okay? E. coli. E. coli. This is the full name of that species. But these species come in many different strains, which is just a variant of a species. This O157H7, that is a particular strain of E. coli that is disease-causing. Typical or normal E. coli occurs naturally in our gut and actually doesn't cause disease. But there are some strains, like this O157H7, that can cause disease. And it is increasing in occurrence, becoming more common. And so this is an example of an emerging disease. It's relatively new, and it's increasing in its occurrence. Then we have re-emerging diseases. Okay, these are familiar old diseases that have once disappeared or gone much more quiet, have been reduced in occurrence, and now their incidence is on the rise. And so, these are old strains that are becoming new problems. We have a lot of familiar pathogens to talk about here. I think that at this time, measles is perhaps the most important, but pertussis, tuberculosis, lots of others, really. There's a lot that could fall under this category. A lot of the ones that we get vaccinated for, like diphtheria and pertussis and mumps and rubella, things of these natures. These are old pathogens that have been with us for centuries, millennia, in some cases, maybe even as long as humans have been humans. But vaccination has brought a lot of these diseases under control. That is, until more recently. It's worth noting, at least at the time that I'm recording this video, that cases of measles are on the rise because vaccination is becoming less common. That there's increasing amounts of under-vaccination. And so these highly infectious old diseases that have been around for millennia are now coming back and becoming more severe problems in places where they were once eradicated or nearly eradicated, such as the case with measles. Pertussis too, actually. But it's very frustrating. So these, even these familiar but forgotten diseases can return as new monsters, even in some cases, despite our best efforts. So it's very possible for living things to change and overcome our methods to control them, because living things evolve. Okay, as they reproduce, their population changes over time. Individuals, when they're born, they can mutate, like as DNA is replicated. and that can potentially introduce a new variation. Sometimes that variation is helpful, sometimes it's not helpful, sometimes it's harmful. But in the situations where it's helpful, those individuals who have that mutation tend to do better and are more successful than others, meaning that they reproduce more, becoming more representative of the next generation. So if you have a bacterium that is a common human associate, it lives on our body, and maybe it's an opportunistic pathogen, like for example, Staphylococcus aureus, and it mutates. There's a single individual mutates. Single cell has a mutation that happens just by chance to grant it greater protection against a common antibiotic. Well, then if that person goes and gets treated for something, takes an antibiotic, and it doesn't die, then all of the descendants of that species on that person are going to be from that bacterium, the one that's resistant. And so this is how species can change. They can be shaped and evolve to, in some cases, become more problematic for us. And for species that are pathogens, pathogens can also evolve. That the evolutionarily successful pathogens are the ones that actually manage to infect us, reproduce, and spread. New strains are constantly emerging of different species of problematic pathogens, particularly viruses, very rapidly capable of evolving. So we actually see that with this is some dated data for COVID-19, the infectious agent SARS-CoV-2. Well, there's a lot of genetic variants, a lot of strains of SARS-CoV-2 over the years. So this is a map that shows the prevalence of these different strains. So what we see here is as you move through time, June, July, August, September, October, November, December of 2023, and then so on in 2024, you actually see that each of these colors, you have like an increase in the in the abundance of this strain over time until it becomes eventually replaced by something else, and then something else, and then something else. And in some cases, like this strain right here, this JN1 like here, it was something that was so successful that for a while it became the dominant strain. It was the one that was the most successful, and so it proliferated. The other things that came before it became less abundant because it was not as successful. And then new mutations emerge, new mutations, and the next generations of viruses look different. They change over time because they are evolving. Okay, so this is how, in the case of something like COVID, but also something like the flu, for example, every time a new case happens, you have more and more replication of these viral particles. You have more opportunity for mutations, and eventually they start to change. And the ones that happen to make infection easier or better or more effective for the virus, those are the ones that take off and become the most dominant features in the next generation. So, this is really important to keep in mind, especially this evolution quality, because we and all other microbes, all living microbes, are related. We're all distant cousins of one another, okay? This excludes viruses, at least as far as we're aware, because viruses are not alive. But living things that are made of cells that actually descend from past cells, as it states in cell theory, these organisms are alive. And so even the things that are parasitizing us, that are causing us disease, are related to us, albeit very, very distantly. We are going to be studying these organisms over the course of our class. And as we do, I think what you're going to find is that you're going to, as you learn about them, learn a lot about humans too. Okay? You're going to learn about the history of evolution of these groups and what that looks like when they evolve. You're going to learn about core biological processes that living things, particularly bacteria and similar organisms, do. But a lot of those processes are ones that we do too. Homeostasis, the maintenance of living conditions inside of a cell. All living things do this. DNA and inheritance, how this works. All living things do this, and more, right? So there's going to be a lot of things that are shared across these groups as we explore them. Okay, so I want you to go through this hopefully with a bit of an open mind.